Hi everybody, welcome to Take Pandit session. This is Dan. Today I'm going to talk about SSH Proxy and I'm going to give you a quick demo on it. So most of the time in our real life what is happening in cloud, we have our most usable servers or the EC2 instances in our private subnet, and we want to access them from our local laptop which is accessible through internet. So we can't directly access them. So to log into them, what you usually do, you use a public facing instance which is in the same VPC, and then open the security group of the private instance, or change the security group of the private instance so that it can take network connection from the bastion host or the public instance. And then what we do, we log into first to the bastion host and keep the credentials of the key pair of the private instance into the bastion host, and from bastion host again we log into the private instance. So we do actually 2 times hop to log into the private instance. So what SSH proxy does, it uses the same path. Like it first access the bastion host and then access the private instance, but instead of copying the key pair in the bastion host, or you have to do 2 times login, instead of that you can do it in a single command or in a single just access. So that's how we can remove few more steps to access to the private instance. So that is what SSH proxy does. We can configure it in our local machine and then just use it. It's a one-time kind of configuration. So what we are going to do in this demo, we are going to use one bastion host, which is an EC2 instance hosted in public subnet, which can be accessible from local machine, and we are going to use one EC2 instance which is in private subnet and which doesn't have any public IP or public accessibility. And we are going to use our Mac terminal or the Linux terminal of the local machine, and through through that terminal we are going to directly access through this private hosted EC2 instance, private subnet hosted EC2 instance, direct from our local machine, using the SSH proxy. So how does it look? It looks pretty much like this. So we want to access to this private subnet EC2 instance from our local machine, from our laptop, but we just don't want to log in first here and there. Like, you don't want to do these two steps, and we don't want to keep the key pair, that EC2 instance key pair of this private instance into the bastion host. So we want to keep it only at our local machine. So yeah, so that's what we want to do. Let's jump onto the demo. So this is the AWS console, and I'm connected to the nearest region, which is Sydney for me. Now let me go to the EC2 instance console page. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to create two EC2 instances. One is in private subnet and one is in public subnet, so that I can access the public subnet instance from my local laptop, but the private one I can't. So let's go to launch instances. Select Amazon AMI as my default image. Instance type T2 micro. Configuration, I will select my VPC, demo VPC, and I choose one private subnet. So private subnet, let me choose the public one first. So public subnet, so it has auto assign public IP enabled, so that means this instance will get a public IP. Let's go to add storage, default. I will just give a name to the instance, so I'll get a tag as name as public instance, and just go to next security group. I'll create one security group, public SG. Let's give the same name, same as description, and it's open to the world. And just review and launch. Let me create a new key pair. So public key pair, and download the key pair, then launch the instance, and let me go to view instances. It is getting created. In the meantime, let's launch another instance. Same way, Amazon Linux, T2 micro. Then here I will choose the demo VPC, but this time I will choose one private subnet where public auto assign public IP is disabled. So that means this instance is not going to get a public IP. Add storage default. Let me add a name as tag, private instance, and then security group. Let me create one security group as private SG, name same private SG as description. So what I'm going to do, instead of opening into the whole IP range, what I'm going to do, I'm going to open it only to the public security group that I have created just now. So that means this public SG can access to this private instance through port 22, and no one else can access to this private security group. And then go to next, launch, and let me create one key pair, as I will just give private key pair, download the key pair, and launch the instance. Let's go to the instance console. So you can see that these two instances are in creation. The public one has already created, so it has public IP address assigned to it. It has also a private IP address, and the key pair is public key pair. It has a security group which is open to all. And same way, if I'll check the private instance, it is still in creation, so it's now in running state. So if I'll check this private instance, it doesn't have any public IP address, but it has a private IP address. It has a key pair, private key pair. And let's check the security group. Security group is this private security group is attached to this instance, and the security group, it is only open to the public security group, the private public security group that is attached to this public instance. So that's all. So now I have done creating the instances. Let's try to access the instance. So first I will try to access this public instance through my laptop terminal. So let me go to the terminal. So this is the terminal. So what I will do, let me first copy this public instance IP, and I'll go back to the terminal. If I'll do a listing, I have both the key pair available here. So what I will do, SSH -I, then the key pair name. So public instance I want to access, public key pair name, then EC2 user @ the public IP. If I'll do enter, I'm able to access. Oh, it's giving me error because of the bad permission. So let me just change the permission to all these files, .pem files, and now let me try it again. Yes, so I'm now on the instance, so I'm able to log into the public instance. Now let me log into the private instance. Now I don't have any public IP address, so I have private IP address which I have copied. Let me copy it, and then let me exit from this public instance and then try it again. SSH -I, and now this time private key pair, then EC2 user @ the private IP. If I'll do, I can't access it because I don't have any, because first of all this is a private IP, this is not a public IP, so this doesn't exist in the internet domain, and I'm trying to access this. So what will happen, after some time it will give me a connection timeout error. So let's wait to see the connection timeout error. Now what you can see that the SSH has come out, the command has come out, and it is giving me operation timeout. So that means it is not able to access to the private instance. Now one thing we want to check, we want to log into the public instance and want to check if if this public instance have access to the port of 22 to this private instance. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to update this image, because this image is just a base image, Amazon base image. So I'm going to update the image, and then also I'm going to install telnet, because telnet is the utility which I can use to check the IP and port combination of the other instance. So let's this get installed, and then what I will do, sudo yum install telnet, and then why telnet is installed, it is done. So now what I'm going to see from this public instance, now I'm logged into the public instance. From this public instance, I want to check whether this instance can access to this private IP. So what I'm going to do, the command would be telnet. Let me clear the screen. So the command would be telnet, then the private IP of the private instance and the port 22. So yeah, it's enabled, so it is able to access the port. So what I will do quit. If you want to check that it doesn't have access to any other port, so if I'll press some other type some other port, like let's say I want to access port 80, you will see it is trying. So that means, because the security group that we have created, it has enabled only port 22 from the public subnet from the public group or the security group. That's why it is not able to access port 80. Only 22 is enabled. So what I will do, I'll just come out of it, so, and exit from the public instance. Now again I am logged into my local laptop. So now what I am going to do, so I have to do some SSH setting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open a file which is in my home folder, SSH in home path. There is a folder called .ssh. Inside that I'm going to open a file called config and just open it. It's a blank file. So I'm going to put some information. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type this host. I'm going to name this host some name. So let's give it a name like public instance. Okay, and then next line, give some space and then type the host name. So what is the public instance host name? So in this case, the IP of this public instance. So this is the public instance host name. Then I have to type which user would be used to log into this instance. So EC2 user. Then what is the port to be used to connect to this instance? Port number 22. Then I will give identity file and which public key would be used to connect to this instance. So that is in home folder. There is a folder called files name key files, inside which the keys are kept. So wherever you have the keys, the key files are mentioned, key files are present, you have to provide the proper full key name, the complete path. And what is the key file name? So this is the key file name, public keypair.pem, and then we'll say identities only yes. So these are the information that we have to provide. So here in a nutshell, so I'm just giving an alias like public instance as an alias name. You can give anything like XYZ ABC or pub instance 1 or whatever you want to give. So this is a bastion, like whatever you want to give. So I would say let's give it a name of bastion, bastion. So this is my bastion instance through which I will actually which is accessible from public network. So what I'll do, I'll save this file and just come out of it. And now what I have to do, I just have to type SSH, and I want to, let's say I want to access the bastion host or the public instance. So what I will do, I'll just say SSH bastion. Is giving me some, okay, some configuration, bad configuration option, identity file. I think there is some spelling mistake. Okay, so identity file, so that is the wrong. Now I'll come out of it and that's to SSH bastion. So you can see that it is trying to log into the bastion file, but yes, so now you can see that it is now logged into the bastion file or the bastion instance. So we just have to provide the SSH bastion name now, but that is not our objective. Our objective is to log into the private instance. So let's come out of it, and we are going to use bastion instance or the public instance as our hop or as our jumpbox. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to repeat the same thing, going to same configuration things. So let's say this time I will give a name to remote server, okay, and then host name. So my host name of my private instance. So this is the IP of the private instance. I'll give it, and then I will say user, which user would try to connect to this. So EC2 user, and then port, which port to be accessed, port 22 for SSH, then identity file, and same location, key files, and then I have private keypair.pem. So this is the file name, keypair file name, and then we'll just copy this identity only, paste it. So done. So now we know that the remote server name, just alias we have given as remote server. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit from it, and now I try to access a remote server. Is it running? No, it's not working. Actually it's not working. So why? Because I'm trying to access the remote server directly. I'm trying to access the remote server directly from my local machine. So that's the reason it is not giving me, or not, it is not able to connect to the remote server, because remote server IP is a public, no, is a private IP. So private IPs are not accessible from my laptop. That's why it is still going for that loop, and after some time it will give you a timeout error. So what I'm going to do, so let's wait to see the timeout error over here. So now you can see that it has given an operation timeout error, the same error which we saw earlier when we're trying to access the private host using SSH from my laptop. So now what I have to do, so I'll go back to the config. So you can see the configuration for the bastion or the public instance and the configuration for the remote or the private instance, both are same, both are similar, just the IP addresses are different, the key pair names are different. So what additional configuration or information we have to provide in the case of remote server, we have to provide one information called proxy jump, and then we have to provide the name of the proxy server. So what we are instructing, okay, log into this host, which is actually, this is the host name, this is the EC2 instance, everything, and this is the key pair name that we have to use, but use this instance, the bastion host, as your proxy jump box. So what it will do, actually internally it will try to it will first access the bastion host, and then it will, from the bastion host, it will access the remote server, not directly the remote server. So let's try it. So let's save it, and then we'll run the same SSH remote server, and now this time you can see that we are able to log into the private private instance. So you can see the private instance is, this is the private instance, and we are now able to log into the private instance directly from my local machine. So I don't need to go through any, I do not need to actually go through the bastion host. Indirectly it is going through the bastion host, but I no need to first log into the bastion host, keep the keypair file, private keypair file in that bastion host, and then log into the private instance. Instead of that, I have all the keypair files in my local machine. I no need to copy anywhere, just configure this SSH config, and then just provide the path, provide SSH remote server. Yes, so remember, this is the way you can set up the SSH proxy to access to the private subnet instances. So you now know that how to use this proxy jump. You can have multiple servers listed which are going to use same bastion or different bastion host or different public server. So yeah, so that is you can play around with this configuration file, change something. You can try how you can enable like a set of private IP addresses to access through the same bastion. You can try all these things. Yeah, but this is what the configuration file you need to change, and there are multiple configurations available for this proxy jump. You can try around those settings and do. This is the basic preliminary setup that is I have shown. So yeah, and that's all for this demo. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it. If you like the video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel. If you think this information is helpful, please share this with your friends. Thank you.